Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of Kopi Chats with me, Waylene. I think there's been a lot of news going on this year, but there's one topic in particular, quite close to home to us here in Asia, that has not received much attention, even though it's actually a really big deal. And what we see of it in the news is actually just one facet of a very complex picture, extremely unsatisfying. And I'll give you an example with this news article that led me to get started on this exploration in the first place. Here we are. Oh, sorry, look at this. On Channel News Asia, just a couple of days ago, there was this news. 3 years after Exodus, Myanmar erases names of Rohingya villages. UN mapmakers follow suit. So this sounds really bad. We already have heard about the Rohingya people and their displacement. They're forced to escape from their home in Myanmar. And now it seems that their very villages where they used to live are being wiped off the face of the earth, removed entirely, so that nobody would even know where they used to live. And that sounds like another step in what some call like a ethnic cleansing, just one of the worst things in the world. So this sounds on the surface of it extremely serious. Now, here's the thing that got me thinking about this topic. That is, we hear about this thing being done, this really bad thing, people being displaced, their villages being erased from maps, but we're never given a satisfactory reason. Now, from what I recall, we're told that the Myanmar government does not like these people because they are Muslim, whereas the country is majority Buddhist, and for this reason, they're being wiped out. They're being forced out of their homes. And I find that extremely unsatisfying. I think that's a little too neat and not very convincing. So we were told, this is a parallel with, and I don't like this comparison, but it seems very appropriate. That is Nazi Germany. They really hated Jewish people. And it wasn't just because they were of a different religion. There was, I think, as I recall, there was a perception that the Jewish people were taking all the good jobs, were making Germans feel second class in their own country, that sort of thing. So there was a, understandable, not forgiven, but totally unacceptable, but you could understand the logic leading up to their hatred and their anger. But for the case of Myanmar, this is very strange because all the Rohingya people live in the far north, in Rakhine state. So why would the central government be so upset at them that they would want to drive them out of their homes? What have they done? And furthermore, we have all, lived in this generation where we observe that Aung San Suu Kyi, this magnificent lady who won Nobel Peace Prize and who for decades, fought to bring her country, into the international fold, bring democracy to her country. She finally managed to win an election and assume the reins of power. So if we accept that, she understands what it's like to be an outcast, that she was a good person striving to do the best in a difficult situation, what do we think of this? What was the explanation? Why was this never covered in the news? I think it's a question worth asking. So it is with that, frame of mind that I looked into the topic a little bit deeper. So let me share with you what I found. Right. Best article I found on this is from 2015 on a very good website called thediplomat.com. It's a magazine about international relations, foreign affairs, that sort of thing. So let me just take you through it really quickly because I think it's really sheds a little light on what's going on. See, in December 2015, last week, the Shan Human Rights Foundation, so the Shan are an ethnic group in Myanmar. Also, I think they're distinct from the people in the southern and central regions of the country. So they're an ethnic group, a minority ethnic group, and they called for an end to fighting in Shan state and hit out at Myanmar's army for bombing schools, shooting at civilians, and using rape as a weapon of war. It's absolutely terrible. So chronic fighting has taken place in Kachin and Shan state in northern Myanmar since 2015, with air attacks and skirmishes displacing thousands. Even in ceasefire, the Myanmar army has not withdrawn its troops. Okay, the US State Department spokesperson said, if true, these are reprehensible actions, and we urge the government of Burma to undertake credible independent investigation into these allegations. So perfectly understandable, right? Yada yada yada. There are some non-state ethnic armies were excluded from the peace process. Okay. Since October, 7 out of 15 non-state ethnic armies have refused to sign a ceasefire agreement. So this starts to give us a little bit of texture and understanding, a little more nuance about the situation in Myanmar. That is, there are different states and there are different armies fighting for autonomy or independence from the very country that they live in, Myanmar. So they want more autonomy, independence even, and they're fighting for that, and that is the reason for all this fighting. So it seems like a really straightforward problem. Not to say that, the details are not complicated, because it is. There are many stakeholders, there are many parties involved, and they all want their own things for their own people. So it's extremely complex. But if we are to understand the motivations of the people fighting, it is straightforward. They feel that they haven't been taken care of. They feel that perhaps they've been exploited, and they want a greater degree of control over their fate. So that is really simple. And I just want to take a moment now to contrast, what we have been told, what we understand over the years from our regular news sources. Coming back to here, CNA. CNA, I think, is my official new favorite punching bag now. So they call themselves Channel News Asia, but you really won't understand much about Asia if you restricted your news diet to just reading Channel News Asia. So with that being said, I want to take us back to the Myanmar topic, because I don't want to spend all my time bashing Channel News Asia. I mean, I think that they could do a lot better, but I'll let them decide on that. Because this situation about Myanmar is actually quite fascinating. Now let me show you very briefly this page on Human Rights Watch. Human Rights Watch is an international organization promoting human rights. And of course, you would expect they are no friend of the Myanmar government, because the Myanmar government is the very actor accused of, doing terrible things. So they do have a very nice page here that gives us a little bit of historical background. So look at this. Northern Arakan, consisting of contemporary Mongdo and Butidong townships, has since the late 18th century been a region of intermittent unrest and refugee flows. Thousands of Rohingya fled to what is now Bangladesh in four main periods: the 1700s, 1800s, 1940s, 1978, and most recently 1991 and 92. Refugee flows have been prompted by ethnic and religious conflict, which in turn triggered by broader political struggles. This section provides a description of each of the final three flights and concludes with specific attention to the 91-92 exodus, asylum, and return. So just from here, we already know that this Arakan state has been very problematic in the past. It's a place with a lot of conflict, unsettled, political situations, and that sort of thing. And you can see it very clearly here. In 1784, there was a Burmese king who conquered and incorporated the Arakan region into his kingdom of Ava in central Burma. So as a result, refugees began pouring into what is today's Cox's Bazar. So many of the Rohingya that fled during this period never returned to Burma, but instead settled in the area of Cox's Bazar and became integrated with the local community. Right, and then there was, of course, the British. Everybody's favorite bogeyman. Um, the British colonized Burma. During their rule, the Arakan problem declined as British allowed for a relative degree of local autonomy. Right. Uh, the reality is that the Rohingya have had a well-established presence in the country since the 12th century. And reading this, I think that's entirely clear to see. The Rohingya have been around in Myanmar for a very long time, ethnically speaking, and as you can see, there have been a lot of problems though. 1940s, 78, 91, and 92. And that has led us to the current situation, whereby the Rohingya have been displaced, pushed out repeatedly. Okay, look at this. After independence, tensions between government and Rohingya grew. A group of Arakanese Muslims went on the political offensive, pushing for the integration of Mongdong and Otidong into what was then East Pakistan. So, at this point, I want to say something that may be a little controversial. I can see that the Arakanese and the Rohingya, by extension, because the Rohingya are Arakanese, they do not consider themselves a part of Myanmar. So it's pretty clear here. They've had a lot of exodus, a lot of displacement. Now, justifiably, they are angry and suspicious towards central Myanmar government, but it's also clear that they have no desire to be part of their oppressor's country, right? Now, they were also denied citizenship and prohibited from military service and, so on. So, yeah, beginning in 1950, segments of the community resorted to armed action, right? And this actually caused a lot of problems. Burma's prime minister dispatched the ambassador to negotiate an understanding under which Pakistan would no longer provide weapons to the Mujahids. So that seemed to settle that for a time, but it wasn't conclusive. Certainly, we know here in 2020 that the Rohingyas are still being driven from their homes. There's a lot of fighting going on in their part of the world. What we didn't know formally was that the reason was there's a long historical conflict as the Rohingya seek to find their identity, their home, their place in the world between what was then Pakistan or Bangladesh, a Muslim country, and stuck between that and their rulers, which are the Myanmar government. So it's an extremely difficult situation for them. And I empathize with that. Nobody wants to be driven from their homes, especially if you have nothing to do whatsoever with the fight. You just want to live a peaceful life, but just that parts of your community feel strongly enough that they want to take up arms against government. And because the government has a long history of mistrust with your community, so when there's fighting, you are uprooted along with the people doing the fighting. So an extremely terrible situation to be in. And I think it also shows in the way that we receive news about the people suffering here, the Rohingya. That is, when we hear about them, it's always the Rohingya. We don't hear about them as displaced Burmese refugees. I've yet, and I read a lot of news, I have yet to come across an interview where Rohingya identified himself as Burmese, because I'm not sure that really happens. No, that may be controversial, but I think it seems to be the case. And I don't mean that as good or a bad thing, but it is an observation of mine. Now, check it out. This conflict that's been going on is so persistent, and the actors so well organized now that the Arakan army, fighting for the independence of the Arakan state, have their own website talking about their side of the story, the conflict with battle news, photographs, propaganda. Look at this. Some Indian news outlets must stop the spread of misinformation and unjustifiable campaign against the Arakanese people's struggle for political freedom. So when you look at this, you'll see that they're very well organized. They're clearly here to stay, and they're working really hard. They have the website in, let's see, English, Chinese, and Burmese. I don't know if you can see it, but there is Chinese at the bottom. There it is. So the factions fighting in Myanmar are varied and, well organized, well supplied, and we can see it. Check this out from Radio Free Asia. This is news from just a month ago, talking about the government excluding the rebel Arakan army from the Myanmar Peace Conference. So this is a big deal. I didn't know that there's a peace conference going on, designed to bring peace to all different states, Shan state, Kachin state, and so on, trying to bring peace to all the different states, right? So the country can come together once again. And you can see that it's not going smoothly because the Arakan army responsible for, well, at least partly responsible for the issue of Rohingya displacement, are not even welcome at the peace table because they're not viewed, at least by the government, as trustworthy partners in this process. Now, a little bit of good news here is that since then, later in the same month, the peace talks brought about an acceptance that Myanmar may transition from a union to a federation. Now, last time I heard about the difference between union and federation was in secondary school history. It's about the two different political systems. Now, I don't want to get into details. It doesn't matter at all. All I wanted to say is that there's some progress and the country is seeing change. Important, like fundamental, like the constitution level kind of change. And it's invisible to us, even though we're a short flight away. And that's very unfortunate. I think that our news outlets don't do a good job of educating us, informing us about the troubles going on right on our doorstep that people who live around us actually go through. And that's very unfortunate. But I hope that you'll get something from it here. So the Myanmar military, who are ultimately the real power in Myanmar, they accepted the federalism concept as the peace summit wraps up. Now that's a small step forward. Federalism means that each state will get more power to control things in their state compared to the alternative, which is a union. So in a union, more power rests with the central government. So certainly the factions fighting would prefer federalism because they would want to control matters in their own state. Maybe they want to be able to collect taxes. Maybe they want to control, the way that the state government spends its budget. Whether they spend more on schools or spend more on development, or roads. So you can understand that with the different ethnic groups in different states, they would probably think that, okay, well, I don't trust the central government that much, so the more control that I can have, the better it would be for me. So I think that's the straightforward way to understand this. Okay. And last thing to point out is that Aung San Suu Kyi is also pushing the peace process forward because Myanmar, like the United States, is due to have elections this November. So it's a big deal and it's a really important time for Myanmar. Um, even amidst all the fighting and all the unrest, uh, they have to hold their elections and the leaders have to show progress. And that's what Aung San Suu Kyi is trying to achieve. And she's had a really difficult road since she came to power in 2015. I think nobody would be happy with the progress that's been achieved. I think they would say that it's not enough. But let's see what happens, right? It's hard to say. I don't know if there's what kind of alternatives they have, what the political situation is over there. All we know is that there's a great deal of conflict and that the standard narrative that we're told, that is the Myanmar government is driving out Rohingya refugees, is just nonsense. Utter bullshit. It's a simplistic and doesn't tell the full story about what is a complex, multi-layered situation with lots of different interested parties. So with that, I hope that I've given you a little bit more color on what's going on in Myanmar. When you talk to people about this situation in the future, I hope that this arms you a little bit more knowledge so you can tell them the truth about what's going on, and that it'll be a fun time for you that way. All right, that's all I have for you today. Thank you very much for listening. You're all awesome as usual. I'll catch up with you next time.